Hello, in this video I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut and sew this stylish conical peplum dress. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So first we're going to start with drafting the pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and shoulder to waist. For this pattern we're going to draft the upper part first because this is a peplum blouse. Now I'm going to go ahead to mark my shoulder divided by 2 and add half to it. Mine is 14 divided by 2. I have 7 plus half, making it 7.5. I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll go ahead to draw my shoulder slope, which I've already done. And I'll go ahead to mark my basic neckline. I'll be marking 3 by 2 inches. So looking at the neckline, we have a very high neckline there. So what I don't really know if is a turtle neckline because the video is not that clear. So we'll be working with this neckline of 3 by 2 inches. Next is to find your chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So now whatever I have on the shoulder, I'll mark it also at the chest line. And I'll just go ahead to rule a straight line connect to my shoulder point, and I'll go ahead to draw out my chest line at this point. I'll place my ruler and I'm going to draw this out and extend it to the armhole area. So now I'll divide what I have at the armhole into 2 this way, and I'll fold it up. Now I'll mark the midpoint and come out by ½ inch. At the chest line, I'll go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Connect from that bust circumference to the armhole point and to the upper part of your armhole. So this is what I have after I'm done marking out. So next, I'm going to go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. And I'm going to mark. This is also known as your bust band divided by 2. Now I'll just go ahead and connect, drawing the straight line, and I'll be marking 1 inch that on both sides of my pattern, and I'll go ahead to connect. So if you're on a bigger size, you can just go ahead to use 1.5, or you have a bigger bust. Now I'll just go ahead and rule this line. Then I'll connect from the bust down to the under bust of my pattern, and I'll also repeat it at the other side of this pattern, connecting from the under bust to the bust point. So now I'm just going to use my marker to mark this out so that it will be very visible for you to see. So I'll go ahead and divide my shoulder into 2 this way, and I'm going to mark. Now I'm going to go ahead to extend that line to my shoulder, which will serve as a guide when I'm drawing out my darts. So you want to decide how high your neckline is going to be, and I'm just going to use 1.5 inches at this point. And I'll go ahead to mark 0.75 inch at the upper part. Because of the yoke I have on top, I don't want the upper part of my bustier to be too curvy, so that it will be easier for me to sew and to avoid the neckline to be a bit bent, because we're still going to attach that yoke, the center yoke, to the main body of this dress. So I'll just go ahead and remeasure what I have, and it's not really up to 0.75 at both sides, but you can also use your normal dart intake of 1 inch, but I want to reduce mine a bit so that there won't be too curvy when I'm sewing or attaching the yoke part. So whatever you measure there, you're going to extend it at the armhole so that the yoke inside will fit what you have at the lower part of your dress. And I'll go ahead to extend my chest line out. So if your dart intake is 1.5 inches on both sides or 2 on both sides, go ahead to replace it there. So I'll just go ahead to draw out the neckline I have at that point. And after the 3 inches neckline, I'm going to come out either by half or 1 inch from there, and I'm going to go ahead to measure 2 inches from the armhole part of my pattern and I'll mark. So I'll just go ahead and connect this back to the upper part this way, creating that curve we have at the shoulder. Now I'll just use my marker to mark this out to make it more visible for you to see, and I'll also outline the neckline and the shoulder and armhole area. So after now, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to insert my body measurement. At the bust, I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. My bust is 33 divided by 4. I have 8.3, approximately 8.3. Measure the 1.5 inches that and I'll mark. So after that, I'll just go ahead to add my sewing allowance to the pattern. So I'm using 1.5 inch sewing allowance. You can go ahead and use 2 inches or 2.5. It just totally depends on what you want. So whatever I have at the bust, I'm going to mark it at the chest line area. So after I'm done marking that, I'll go over to the under bust. My under bust circumference is 28 divided by 4. I have 7 inches. I'll measure the 2 inches that intake replace and add my sewing allowance. At the top length, I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, which is still 28 divided by 4. I have 7. Measure the 2 inches that intake replace and add my sewing allowance. So now I'm just going to go ahead to connect from my under bust to my bust, from my under bust to the waistline. So this is what I have after I'm done marking out. So I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to mark it out to make it more visible for you to see. So I mistakenly connected from my chest line to the armhole, so please don't do that. Just from the chest line to your bust, under bust and waist. So here I will label here as my inner yoke. So if you notice, if you take out this dart, the bust area will be a bit smaller than what you have at the yoke. So that's why we marked that extra dart, the extra dart intake we took out by the side. So when we are done cutting this, we are going to replace it back and you're going to see the result. So I'll just go ahead and cut out my pattern. If you have any question regarding this particular tutorial, please don't forget to leave the question at the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel. And I also have a second YouTube channel, which is Drafts with Maki. So you can also go ahead and check it out. I have amazing tutorials there on how to cut different styles. So after cutting out the neckline, and I'm going to place it this way. So this is what I was talking about. When you place it, you notice that what you have at the under part will be merging or matching with the upper part of your yoke this way. So all I'm going to do right now is just to go ahead to cut out the rest of the pattern. So for this dress, there are two ways to go about it. You can either leave the yoke and then tack what you have back on the shoulder, like the design, cut it out and top stitch, or you can just go ahead to cut out the yoke and sew it as two different pieces. So I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but when we are sewing, I'll be explaining that. So let's go ahead and cut the peplum part. So for the length of the peplum, you're going to go ahead to decide what you want to work with. So this pattern paper is just 7 inches, and at the length part of this pattern paper, I folded it into 2. So I went ahead to mark my waist circumference divided by 4. So after that, I'll be adding 1 inch to this because I don't want to have too much allowance on the peplum part. So in case I need any adjustments, I can easily do that. Now at the lower part, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'm just going to go ahead to mark 6 inches extra to get that elongated effect, and I'll add 1 inch back. So for this pattern, I went ahead to mark it this way, just in case if I need any adjustment, I'm still going to adjust it when I'm sewing. So from there, I'm just going to go ahead to connect from my waist down to the hip point this way. So if you're okay with what you have, you can just go ahead to cut it out. So at this point, I'm going to come up by 1.5 inches at the midpoint, and I'm going to slant it all the way to the other side of this peplum this way. So after I'm done doing that, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So after I'm done outlining, this is what I have. And we'll be also cutting out the other side of our peplum because it has two sides. So I'll go ahead and open up my pattern this way. So this is what I have. So on the other side of my pattern, I'm going to go ahead and measure about 4 inches from my waistline, and I'm going to connect it to the other side. So if you notice, the other side won't be as long as this other side of the pattern. So after that, I'll just go ahead and I will cut out my pattern this way, and we'll be moving over to the back part of the pattern after that. So if there's still need to readjust it, I'm going to still do that before or during sewing out my dress. So I'm going to also use this pattern to cut the back part. All I'll do is flip it to this side, add a zipper allowance, and also turn to the other side and add a zipper allowance to it. So still on the other side of this pattern, you notice that what we have in the picture, one side is really elongated while the other side is not. So from the waistline, I'll just trace this out a bit. From the center point, I'll place my tape and I'll mark my hip circumference. And after that, I'll be measuring 3 inches and add half to it. So I have 13.5 on this side. So I'll just go ahead to connect it. So one side is not really long, but you can just leave yours this way, but I feel it might be too long for me. But if you're okay with that, just continue with what you have. So let's move over to the back pattern. So for the back pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out my basic measurement just like we did in front. And for the neckline, I used 3 by 2 inches and I added a zipper allowance in front. So next, I'll go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, just like we did at the front pattern. So all the measurements I'm marking starts immediately the zipper allowance. So I'll be marking ½ inch for my dart intake, and I'll go ahead and take it up. So this is what I have at this part, and the next step is just to insert your body measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, add my 1.5 sewing allowance, mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake and add my sewing allowance. At the waist, I'll go ahead to mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure this dart intake with place, and I will be adding back my sewing allowance. So I'll just go ahead to place my curved rule, connecting from the bust to the under bust and to the waist point. So this is what I have for the back, and I'll go ahead to outline this part of my dress. So I'll mark ½ inch at the back at the zipper allowance, and I'll mark it up to get rid of the bulginess at the back of the dress. Now I'll be extending the chest line area of my pattern this way. So next, at the upper part of my pattern, I'll go ahead and mark ½ inch and connect it all the way down. So this is what we have at the back pattern, and you're going to create a loop to connect to the other side. So you don't need a zipper at that point. I'll just go ahead to cut out the rest of my pattern. So after cutting this out, I'll be doing some little adjustments on the pattern also. I'll be taking out 0.25 at the lower part of my yoke and also at the upper part of my pattern. This is to get rid of the excess at the yoke and get rid of the zip from popping up at the back. So after this, we are done. So see you in our next video where we'll be sewing this pattern and also cutting out the sleeves.